So we want to talk about the aluminum trail.
Okay.
Why was it called the aluminum trail?
Well, as I said, there were so many planes lost, and they would try to always find
Why were they lost? Why were they lost?
Well, we don't know. They may have had an engine trouble. Maybe they iced up, or they had vertigo and crashed. But there were
hit the mountains.
They might not hit the mountains. They might just have to bail out because of engine trouble. If you're flying a little two-engine plane and one engine quits and you're just barely able to go along on both engines, if you only have one, you have to bail out. Or if an engine catches on fire, or if they were hauling things around in the plane and the weather was so bad and bouncing around, it could even throw things out of the plane. For instance, these big barrels of gas, you know, or if the plane didn't always make a delivery of their gas because if they had problems, they started throwing all those barrels out. In fact, I've heard the story that the United States was printing a lot of money for Chiang Kai-shek and the Chinese, and they would print it over here in our country and ship it in big bales. And so one time a pilot was taking a big shipment of money over to the Chinese, and he got in trouble, and so they kicked out several $1 million. And some of it's probably still up there in a glacier.
Oh, for goodness sake.
But,
so
you know,
then the aluminum trail is actually because when you fly over it, you see
you
all
can
these
almost,
shiny metal
you just see
below.
a string of reflections from the aluminum. And the worst day that we had in flying the Hump was on January 6th of 1945. And there were 45 planes lost that day and night because the weather was just too rough. And they ran out of gas, or they were flipped upside down, or they crashed into a mountain, all sorts of things. And usually the search and rescue people would try to put a big X painted on something so that every time somebody would report a crash or a new plane down, they could look at the location of the map and say or see that it had an X on it, knowing that they'd already investigated that.
So it was not usually, they were not usually able to land because of the rugged terrain, the mountains and the jungle, so they had to bail out. And
if you're in trouble,
what would happen now when they bailed out?
Let's say that probably half of the people that bailed out were hurt, either getting out of the plane or when they pulled their parachute, if they were trying to hold something, or a pistol or a piece of equipment would come up and hit them in the face, maybe knock them out, or maybe they got banged against the plane as they jumped out or something like that. And then if you were in that area between the Naga Hills and the Irrawaddy area, it looks nice and green, but it's just a jungle, and it's full of elephant grass, which is like razor sharp and may grow as high as 10 feet. And of course, Stilwell and Merrill's Marauders and all those poor soldiers that were trying to go through and haul material in on their mules, they were always having to use machetes and stuff, and that's why there's no trails, no roads, because that growth, with all the rain, it's always there. And then, on top of that, the rain breeds mosquitoes. We were heard of cases of lots of red ants, and somebody'd be hurt laying there, you know, before he could start moving around. If he lit near a red ant pile, they'd almost chew him to death. It'd be so painful he'd pass out, and then they would eat him up. Or maybe one of the worst things was the leeches. You could never go around with open skin. You always had to be covered up, because a leech is probably 1 inch or 2 inches. Well, they fasten themselves to you, and they suck blood, and gosh, there's a jigger full of blood in a hurry. And the best way to get the jigger off from you is take a cigarette and go like that. Otherwise, if you try to pull him off, his head is still there, and he's still draining blood out of you. Maybe you got 50 those doggone insect or
I guess they're insects, parasites of some sort. Well, so if they manage to bail out and not land in a tree, and did any of them just, I suppose, got stuck
when you
in the
bail
trees?
out and there's 5 of you, and you jump out, and you say you're 15,000 feet, you try to delay your parachute a little bit because you don't have any oxygen up at that altitude. But then you're going to be taking different areas. You're not going to be together, because the wind's going to blow one guy, and one guy's going to be on one side of a mountain and somebody on the other. And then a lot of times in that jungle and stuff, you're going to get hung up in a tree. And if you ever happen to bail out at night, you didn't want to try to go down to the ground. It might be 50 or 100 feet, and you could kill yourself when you took your parachute off or loosened it to come down. And then if you got down and you tried to locate your friends, you stumbled around, there's no trails, maybe you're following something that a tiger or some other wild animal is around, and you're going on this trail, and then you see a human being, and usually those little native people were only about 4 feet tall, and you didn't know whether they were going to be friendly or not, whether they were going to be a headhunter, or if they did come up and you give them a little money or something to take to a friend, they might take you to a Japanese and get 800 rupees for turning you in.